Hello, all. Welcome back to another episode of DNR Sports, Do No Right Sports. We are your two hosts today, Dan and myself, Richie. And today we have a treat for you guys. We are doing our top five fantasy football busts for the 2021 NFL Draft. I love that word. It's a funny word. It makes us laugh. We are immature as hell. We're each going to do five in two separate videos. I will go first with my top five. Dan will go next in his top five. That will be in the next video coming in the next few days. Dan, are you ready to begin?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So for my number one player, I have tight end Kyle Pitts. This is going to be a little controversial because everyone is in love with him. He was a draft favorite among many. A lot of people thought he was a player that was impossible to fail in the NFL level. And I think that's just having any type of label on a player like that, it's almost setting up for failure. It's kind of like with the Titanic when it sank in 1912 and it was unsinkable and people didn't think that the ship could go down. It went down. So nothing's impossible. I do think there's a chance that he fails on the off chance that you know he doesn't make the transition into an NFL tight end correctly because it is hard. There's a lot to learn. But in terms of fantasy purposes, at least in year one, I think it's going to be a tough load on him to well, I can't play tough load. Silly me. It's going to be a tough load on him to learn the whole new position. Especially because in college he was blocking a little bit. For the most part he was running routes, and he was the wide receiver role, big body, go up and get it, box people out. And I'm not saying he can't do that on in the NFL, but it's going to be a huge transition for him to learn blocking all the receiving routes, line up off tackle in the slot on the outside. So I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit here. He's ranked at tight end 9 on Fantasy Pros, and they have him above guys like Robert Tonyan, Gesicki, Higby. And I just think that those players, they're proven commodities. They're also number one tight ends in their team, and they've shown that they can play. Uh, on the off chance that Julio does get traded, I think that could actually hurt Pitts because there might be more attention on him. And again, he hasn't played a single snap in the NFL. So I think we need to pump the brakes here. A top 10 tight end, it's nice to say, but I don't think he should be drafted that high. I'm fine with him going after the guys I said, like Tanya and Getsicki, maybe around a tight end 15, because we're just not sure with these tight ends yet. So with that being said, Dan, what are your thoughts on Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, so just overall for tight ends coming in their rookie year, if you look at people like George Kittle, Evan Ingram, stuff like that, like they weren't great their first year, and they came on a little later. It's one of those positions that's just very hard to learn overall, and you're not going to get playing time if you don't know how to block as well. Um, that being said, I actually do think if Julio gets traded, I like him a lot more. I think with Julio and Calvin there, I don't see how he's going to get on average more than like 5 targets a game. That's just going to be very tough to do. I do like the upside he has. That's what everyone obviously with any rookie, everyone's like, oh, the upside, the upside. But yeah, we do have to think of the downsides. Mainly, how has Matt Ryan performed with tight ends? Austin Hooper, when he had him, he was like an all right tight end. He was a top, I think, 12 tight end. Last year, Hayden Hurst was definitely underwhelming. Everyone kind of expected him to take over the Hooper role. He was all right. But, anyways, last year, the tight end position was pretty poor to begin with. So, I mean, for him doing, like, I think it was about 9 points per game, that's like decent. But, when Kelsey's getting like almost 20, it's, not comparable. But overall, I would agree that Kyle Pitts definitely we can't overvalue rookies, especially tight ends. That's the worst position to do it at.
I definitely agree. Yeah. All right. So coming in at number two, I have wide receiver Michael Thomas. I'm just not sure what I'm getting from that Saints offense. And if you've watched our previous videos, you know that I've said this before, and I feel the same way about Kamara. But I feel even more so with Thomas because at least Kamara is like the guy. And I'm not underselling Thomas's ability because we talked about it before, and Dan thought this, and I agree. Like he's got ability. You don't just break the catch record in a single season by accident. So you got to have some type of ability there. Um, the problem is Jameis going to be the quarterback? Is Hill going to be the quarterback? We don't know. Uh, I like to think it's going to be Jameis because in terms of deep ball, in terms of just pure throwing talent, Jameis has got it over Taysom Hill. but we don't know. And a big thing that I'm thinking of is they're gonna sub in Hill in the goal line. They did it with Breeze. They're gonna do it with Jameis at quarterback if he's the guy, and that's gonna take away from both Thomas and Kamara's like touchdown potential because Hill's gonna just take it in himself because we've seen in the games that he started, he can't make a read for his life when he's in the red zone. He throw into double coverage. He won't see a lurking linebacker that's maybe not like not in the second level, maybe like closer up to the line of scrimmage. Uh, he's just not accustomed, and there's a reason why he's been bouncing from team to team. I know he's on the Packers at one point. There's a reason why he didn't make a roster. You know, he's not just a pure quarterback. Um, so it so like I said, fantasy process him at wide receiver 9, and some guys that I take over him are Keenan Allen. I think he's gonna have a breakout year this year. Similar, I know Dan believes that too. I have him over Allen, or he's over Allen Robinson, but I take him over Robinson because Robinson, at least last year, got tons of targets. He was like a 7 catch, like 16 target kind of guy. And if you're gonna get like 12 plus targets a game, I'm gonna take you easily over Michael Thomas because Thomas even last year, like he wouldn't even get a ton of targets when Hill and Jameis were in, so we don't know. Also, Julio Jones, he's a I mean, maybe not so much in his career because of with injuries, but he used to be a rack monster. He'd get you like 10 catches for 200 yards and no touchdowns, but I mean that's a crazy fantasy day. And then Amari Cooper, who I think is going to have a resurgence this year in the second year of their scheme. So with deep wide receiver fantasy draft class, I just don't see Michael Thomas having a crazy like a place in the top 10. I don't see him having crazy upside here. Dan, what are your thoughts on Michael Thomas?
So I'm a little different. I do believe if it is Jameis, I actually really like Michael Thomas. Um, to be good at fantasy doesn't mean you have to be good at real life. And we saw with the Bucks 2 years ago when Jameis was at the helm with Ryan Fitzpatrick, they could throw, or that was 3 years ago. 2 years ago was just Jameis, but they throw all the picks in the world that they want, and it only helps you as a receiver because you have to throw from behind anyways. We know Jameis is willing to jam it in. He's going to give him. I think if it's fully Jameis, let's say no Taysom on like the actual like drives. Maybe the goal line is a little different, but the actual drive portion, I think it's going to be mostly Jameis. So I think probably I could see 12 targets per game in general. I know last year with Taysom under center, Michael Thomas would get like 5 targets, 11 targets, like 4 targets, 12 targets. It was like bouncing all over. The main concern overall is the red zone for me because 2 and 3 years ago he was averaging about 8 to 11 touchdowns per season. Like he was a solid goal line threat. The issue now is that last season he played 7 games. Granted, I think 2 or 3 of them weren't full games, but he scored 0 touchdowns. That's just not going to cut it. That's a product of Alvin Kamara being so efficient, and also Taysom Hill just not throwing on the goal line. It's just like they just do a run option every single time, whether it's Taysom or Kamara or Latavius even sometimes. So that's my concern, goal line for sure. But I do think I think he has the upside of that 2019 season where he could get an absurd amount of catches and targets, but I don't know about the touchdowns following along with that. In my heart, Jameis should totally be the quarterback. I don't know why Taysom is getting so much money to be there. I don't know why he is there. Like he's good, but I think if they just play like normal football, like they could be a great team again. So yeah, I do think right now I'm okay with 9 just because I do think it's Jameis. But if we get reports that it's going to be more Taysom, then yeah, obviously he's going to drop for me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just talent, like you said, talent is there for Thomas. There's so many wide receivers there. The offense is just a not sure thing. But I digress. Not 9 is fine. For you, for me, a little high. Coming in at number 3, I have tight end Evan Ingram. He on Fantasy Pros is their tight end 13. Um, I've had an up close and personal experience with Evan Ingram for the last, I believe it's been 4 years now. Um, he has no business being at tight end number 13. Um, First off, he's not going to be using the red zone. Maybe for some like sweeps or something, or like quick handoffs in the backfield if it doesn't go to Kadarius Toney. But they're gonna want to use Kyle Rudolph, their new free agent acquisition. He's a savvy tight end, especially in the red zone. He knows how to block, which could also take away from some of Ingram's snaps. And also the Giants have loaded their offense in terms of weapons, and Ingram might get phased out if he starts, dropping the ball a little bit. Because last season, I can think of at least two or three right off the top of my head drops that he had that went right into the hands of the DB or the defender, and that's just not going to cut it with so many targets and so many weapons on that offense. If you're messing up, you're not going to play. Also, because Ingram's in his last year of his contract, they're not obligated to give him playing time because he might not be in the team next year. Um, there are two players that are after him, listed after him on the list that I think I would take over Ingram right now, and it's Tyler Higby and Austin Hooper. Um, Higby because after the departure of whatever the guy's name is that went to
Gerald
Seattle,
Everett.
Everett, thank you. After Everett left, Higby's going to be the guy. Um, and then Hooper, Dan mentioned before, and I didn't actually know this. Hooper got a ton of red zone targets. And I with that production and that, like, the difference between a touchdown and no touchdown, 6 points is a ton, especially for the tight end position. So I think with that type of upside from those two players, I would easily take him over Ingram. Because I don't see Ingram again having a lot of red zone use, maybe getting like 3 catches for 50 yards, which, I mean, looking at it, like 8 points, like, it's solid, but like he's not gonna have a touchdown upside. And the lower down the board you get, the harder it is to pick. So tight end 13, maybe you guys are fine with that, and I that's fine. But as a Giants fan, I'm not counting on it. I'm not counting on Evan this year. I don't see him having a crazy productive year. What are your thoughts on Ingram?
So I think there's a couple aspects. I think overall having Saquon back and having the new guy Tony, Kevin Galladay, Sterling Shepard, why am I forgetting why am I forgetting his name?
Yes, Slayton. Yeah.
Slayton, yeah, Darius Slayton. Like that's just too many options. Like he has potential. He's a great athlete and whatnot, and a good fantasy player overall. But the addition of three of those new players, that's just going to take away a lot. When you combine that with Daniel Jones, um, just I'm sorry, but not being a good quarterback. Like at least be in the situation Allen Robinson's in, where he's the only like he's the only guy, so he's going to get the targets. This is you're like the fifth option, and you have a shit quarterback. Um, so I also the red zone point's huge. I think Austin Hooper's miles better than him in the red zone. I think Baker actually likes to throw to tight ends in the red zone. Daniel Jones can run it himself. They love Saquon in the red zone. Um, there's just too many options, and red zone usage is just the biggest priority for a tight end. Like yards and catches are nice. That's what Evan is. Like he's almost a receiver in a tight end position. But yeah, Kyle Rudolph coming into that's just oh my god, that's killer. I don't see too much upside here. He's gonna have a couple games like maybe getting 17 points one week, 21 the other, but there's gonna be many weeks where it's like 8.6 or like 6.3, like something like that. He's gonna have a lot of those weeks. So yeah, I'm with you there. I would definitely take Austin Hooper especially over him.
It's actually funny that you mentioned Baker and tight ends in the red zone, because I can think of one play when Ingram was a rookie where he went on a fade and we threw it up to him and he caught it in the red zone. That was the only touchdown catch of that he had in his 4 years as a Giant.
Really?
I think they've tried very sparingly to do that kind of thing for him.
Wait, do you mean only touchdown in the red zone or only touchdown?
So I mean, like on like a fade route
Okay, okay,
where they
okay.
kind of just throw it up to him.
Yeah,
That's the only thing. That's the only time they've ever tried, and it was successful.
yeah, yeah.
Ingram's kind of like the Julio of red zones for our team.
Right.
Like
I kind of
he's just not gonna get it.
I kind of see it like especially just Baker in general. We saw when Austin Hooper had that he had the what's it called? Your appendicitis. He had that and they had that dude Harrison Bryant play that one week and he got like 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game. Like that like it's just one of those offenses where they focus to tight ends and running backs whereas the Giants it's kind of there's just so many pieces. And even if they're looking at tight ends, he's the number 2 tight end in the red zone, so yeah.
I agree. Avoid him if you can. Coming in at number 4, I have wide receiver AJ Brown. He is the wide receiver 5 according to Fantasy Pros, and in general, I think that whole Titans offense is going to take a step back this year, which is kind of crazy to think about. But just hear me out. Their defense is worse. It's significantly worse, especially in the back end with the DBs. They have, I believe, 2 rookie corners playing now. Um, and because of that, I think they're going to have a lot of growing pains. I think it's not going to be a solid unit and they're not going to have much chemistry, at least not at the beginning of the year. And that whole Titans offense is based off play action to Mr. Derrick Henry. And if you're in behind in games, that play action's not going to work. And I believe that's the big reason why Tannehill, who I was going to put on this list, but I chose another quarterback. That's why I think he's going to have a step back because he's been just reliant on Henry's presence and having the play action. And so along with now AJ Brown, whose biggest plays of the season, and mind you, he is a big play dependent wide receiver. His big plays come off the play action where he can run like a post or a dig, um, create a lot of separation because the corner's not sure if it's going to be a run or a pass. Have the linebackers bite. He's behind the whole defense and he takes it the whole way. He takes it like 80 yards or whatever. He's fast, and if you can get him in the open field, he can break a play. He can break a like a long touchdown. But I don't think they're going to have that many opportunities. Like he's not a crazy like consistent, let's say like 12 targets, 8 catches kind of guy. Like he's did a lot of his damage off of just big plays. Um, and again, in a crowded wide receiver fantasy draft class, I would take players like Metcalf, Ridley, Jefferson, Allen, who are going to be teams that are just throwing. You know, maybe Seattle will have a little bit more play action than the other ones, but I can see all those teams just consistently dropping back and throwing the football. We even saw Ridley last year, who wasn't even the wide receiver one, and he got crazy production. Um, so, I would take all those guys over him. I don't trust in the Titans offense this year. And so I think AJ Brown at wide receiver 5 is a little overvalued. And I think he's not gonna live up to his hype, and I think he's gonna be a bust. Dan, what are your thoughts on Brown?
So I'm not against their offense like you are. I'm just against this ADP. I think 5 is just egregious. Amari Cooper is 14. Like, what is the difference between AJ Brown and Amari Cooper? Amari Cooper, yes, has another receiver, CeeDee Lamb, but he also gets targeted a lot more than AJ Brown. AJ Brown on average is about 6 to 8 targets a game. He just breaks a lot of big plays. Amari Cooper gets 10 to 12. I think Terry McLaurin could get the same amount of honestly a lot more workload than AJ Brown. I think Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Justin Jefferson, especially Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, that's not even comparable. Calvin Ridley was without Devontae and Tyreek last year, he was the best receiver. DK as well. Like DK, there's really no difference between him and AJ Brown. I just don't see how you can put him 5 when there's about like 7 receivers. And Julio Jones, if he stays in Atlanta, I have Julio over AJ Brown for sure. It's just too high. 5 is way too high. I have him personally at 11. So yeah, I would agree here. He's just overvalued.
Yeah, like I said, ton of receivers this class. They're all going to be really good. Brown, top 5 upside, maybe not so much. Coming in at my number 5 overranked, I'll say, player. It's quarterback Jalen Hurts, who is quarterback 9. So Fantasy Pros has him as the top 10 quarterback to draft for fantasy. Um, I can't see it. He's not a proven player. Last year he was very inconsistent and he was game to game. Even if you just look at his game log, he had 2 games of over 300 yards passing, but in one of them he was 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And it was one of the one touchdown he had was a deep ball just to Deshaun Jackson. And look at his QBR in that game. It was 19.4. Another game where he got benched against Washington, which I think was more about the coaching and less about his play. He had a 42 QBR and like I said, 19 and then 260s, which is like, that's okay. Nothing amazing. And then when he came in against Green Bay, the game was already over at that point and he still only had a 30 QBR. So I think he's a little overhyped for quarterback 9. I could see the ground game potential that he has, but overall, I think the offense is gonna stall. I mean, there's a reason why in a bad NFC East, like a bad NFC East, they are the number 4 projected team. Because the Eagles are not projected to be good. Their defense is still sus with a lot of holes. Their offense maybe looks good on paper, but with young wide receivers and a young QB, um, I just don't think. I think it's a recipe for disaster. Instead of success, it's not going to go well. And also they're going to play an NFC East with a good Redskins defense. Oh, canceled. and a good Giants defense also. Maybe against Dallas they play well, but even last year against a horrid Dallas defense, Hurts still had the 19.4 QBR game. So And then I guess some players that I would take over Hurts would, as crazy as this is, I would take Tom Brady over him because Brady can easily throw 300 yards, 3 touchdowns in a game, and solid fantasy day. Matt Stafford, who I think is going to thrive in that new offense with Sean McVay. I would take Joe Burrow, who I think is going to be a fantasy sleeper for this year, and then Matt Ryan, who he's never slept on. I think he always rises in the ranks last minute, but with all the weapons that they have on offense and their horrid defense, I think that they're just going to be passing the whole time. And that's that's when Matt Ryan's at his best, when they're down, gets a bunch of garbage yards and makes it happen. So QB9's a little high for me for Jalen Hurts. I'd have him maybe more toward QB 15. But Dan, what are your thoughts on Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I don't. I definitely think 9 is a little strong, especially the way they ended that season where he got benched, and it was just like he was clearly pissed about it. Coming to the draft, they weren't sure if they were going to get a quarterback. Like things kind of were, like an Aaron Rodgers, not an Aaron Rodgers type situation, but like just an uncertainty. Um, I do agree that all the quarterbacks you mentioned are definitely more consistent and probably offer higher upsides. If he's the starter with his rushing ability, he has a pretty good upside. But I think the only concern is really Julio Jones for Matt Ryan, and then everybody else in that list was pretty spot on. Like I would agree with all of them. So I don't hate him at 9. Like it's just if you feel strongly that he's going to be the starter for the whole year, then okay, you can take that reach on him. Maybe he pans out like Lamar Jackson from 2 years ago. Um, but I do think he's more around 13 for me.
And that's another thing that I agree with too. Like they haven't committed to him. They can't. They said, Joe Flacco, you're coming in, you're competing. So if there's a chance that Hurts struggles, he might just be gone. They might try a Flacco, or maybe they have another quarterback on a roster that they like.
Yeah.
Um,
Like Matt Stafford's not going to get benched. Tom Brady's not going to get benched. You know what I mean? That's just not even a question. Like a question. Um,
unless they're already up by like 30 points, you
right.
know. But with that being said, that was my top 5 fantasy football busts. I almost said sleepers busts for the 2021 draft.